So we talked about the Type 1 hypervisors. So these are bare metal hypervisors. So now we need to talk about Type 2 hypervisors, or what are called hosted hypervisors. Hosted hypervisors are hypervisors that are installed onto the operating system itself. So whether you have Mac OS X, Linux, Windows 7, etc. Basically, you have the physical computer, you install the operating system onto the physical computer, you then install the hypervisor onto the operating system, and then you install the instance of the operating system onto that hypervisor. So before, you had the server, and then you had the hypervisor. Basically now, you have the server, then you have an operating system, then you have a hypervisor, then you have the instance. What makes this nice, what makes this easy, and why you all probably would want to do this versus the Type 1 hypervisor is you don't need this management software in order to configure and play with the instance of the operating system that is on your computer. Basically, the instance of the operating system on a Type 2 hypervisor literally opens up in a window, just like any application, and then you can just use it. You can right click, you can left click, you can write documents, etc. You don't need management software in order to be able to play with it. So for most people, this is the type of virtualization that they're going to be using. Even in the corporate world, a lot of people use Type 2 hosted hypervisors. Like I say, just because it's easy. You know, if you're not worried about consolidating 100 servers into one box, you know, you just want like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 servers running on one box, it may be a lot easier to use a Type 2 hosted hypervisor because you can just turn on the screen for the box, you got a little mouse, you can do whatever you need to do, and then you can walk away from it. You don't need this management software. Now, the nice part, again, with Type 2 hosted virtualization is many of the products are free. So from Microsoft, there's Virtual PC. From Oracle, it used to be Sun Microsystems. There is VirtualBox. There are other options out there. These Type 2 hypervisors are generally free to use. Sometimes if you want to use the more advanced features, you have to pay a little bit of money, but you know that's how it always goes. A couple of the warnings that I will give you if you decide to start using a Type 2 hypervisor is be careful of the resource allocation that you give your instances of operating systems. So if you give a server that you're installing onto your computer, let's say 4 gigs of RAM for the instance, it will automatically take all 4 gigs of RAM even if that server is not using it right then and there. So we talked about with Type 1 hypervisors where you can do the over allocation. That's not really how it works with these Type 2 hypervisors. For the most part, if you give an instance a certain amount of RAM or a certain hard drive space, the virtualization hypervisor will automatically take that from the host computer for the instance. Why this can be a problem is because you can literally take so many resources for your virtualized instances that you can end up crashing the host computer. So the host computer, let's say it needs 2 gigs of RAM simply to run, you know, if you're using Windows or something. Well, if you have 5 gigs of RAM, and then you give 3 gigs to some server, and then you give another gig to another server, well, if those 2 servers are turned on at the same time, 4 gigs of RAM will now be taken for those instances. Your hosted computer now only has 1 gig of RAM left to do what it needs to do, and then it just crashes. It all goes bad. So just be careful about this. Whatever resources you give to the instances of the operating system, when you turn them on, the computer will automatically take those resources. The other warning that I will give you is be careful of networking if you are going to be using the host computer for other things. So let's say you create a web server in an instance, and you create an FTP server in an instance, you create an Active Directory server in an instance, and all those need to use the network. Well, if you open up Outlook, or if you're browsing the web on the host computer operating system, sometimes that network traffic can all get a little wiggly, and it doesn't work properly. So I've seen this in the past where we've created instances of operating systems and turned them on a host computer, and then email just stops working. Web browser works fine, file transfer works fine, but Outlook just stops receiving email. This can be one of the issues that comes about when you're using these Type 2 hypervisors. So if you have the instances turned on and you're using the host computer doing stuff, things may get a little weird. The other warning that I will give you is with all of this Type 2 virtualization software, virtual PC, VirtualBox, etc., they almost always have operating system add-ons. This is software that you can automatically install into the operating system that's installed on a hypervisor. This will make the operating system instance run much, much, much better. I don't know why. It's really weird that it's not automatically installed, but if you don't install these add-ons, you can have some problems for some reason. But that's basically what Type 2 hypervisors are, and these are probably what you're going to be using. We do have a class on Type 2 hypervisors, introduction or VirtualBox. We have VirtualBox class. You can go do a search for it. We have one, which will show you how all this works. But basically with the Type 2 hypervisors, again, you have the hardware, then you have a normal operating system, Windows 7, OS X, Linux, Unix, whatever you're using. Then you have the hypervisor, then you have the instances of the operating system, and that allows you to run multiple instances of operating systems on one computer. You can do this for, testing out projects. If you're creating new software, you can test it out on different operating systems. If you're a web developer, this means on one computer, you could have a Mac OS X computer and a Windows 7 and a Linux, and you can look at the website you're designing. You guys, if you're going out to test for these Microsoft tests, you can buy a really, really, really powerful desktop computer with, let's say, 30 gigs of RAM, and then you can actually create an entire virtual network on that one computer. So you could create a 2008 Active Directory server, a 2008 IIS server, and 4 client computers, and a Linux computer, and then you can all try to network them and do all the weird projects that Microsoft wants you to be able to do. You can do all of that. So those are some of the reasons that you would use a Type 2